The church's one foundation is Jesus Christ her Lord.
Welcome once again. Our theme for this month is Grace in Suffering. So we have tackled suffering is in the package of grace with Pastor Rocky. And last week, Brother Eben talks about God's grace in suffering through crisis and calamity. So our today's preaching was titled Sufficiency of Grace in Suffering. So we are all experiencing the effect of this pandemic. We are restricted for so many things, and we are wondering when it will end or how it will end. And it adds up more problem due to this pandemic, like financial pressure, fear, anxiety, discouragement, and sometimes we lose hope. The question of why bad things happen to seemingly good people is an issue that troubles many. So disease, crime, hunger, poverty, accident, and natural disasters seems to strike without reason and affecting both the seemingly good and innocent people. So, madalas pag may nangyayaring sakuna, aksidente, or pag may namatay, di ba, lagi nating tanong, bakit siya pa, di ba? Napakabait naman niya, parang ganun. So, the Bible teaches that bad things happens to all people because we are fallen. We are all fallen sinners who live in a fallen world. So, no one is inherently good. There is none righteous, none even one. And because of that reality, suffering is universal. So according to Job, chapter 5, verse 7, man is born for trouble as sparks fly upward. And even Jesus declared, in the world you have tribulation. While Paul reminded Christians that it's through many tribulation that we must enter the kingdom of God. Because all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. So even God's most noble servants are not immune to suffering. So as you know, Jonathan Edwards, he was probably the greatest theologian in America was ever known. For more than 20 years, he faithfully labored as pastor of the church in Northampton, Massachusetts. His preaching had profound impact on the widespread 18th century revival known as the Great Awakening. So incredibly, after two decades of faithful ministry, the congregation voted Edwards out of his church. And they did so not because of any moral blemish or doctrinal deviation on his part, but because he insisted that only those who had made a public confession of faith be permitted to join the church and partake in the Lord's Supper. So like Jonathan Edwards, Paul experienced the same experience with the deepest pain in life. So being rejected by those whom he cared and he ministered to, the apostle loved the Corinthians. So he had brought the gospel to them, nurtured them, taught them, and poured out his life into them. That many of them had abandoned him in favor of the Paul's apostles. And it hurts Paul deeply. He was, and in fact, he was experiencing the severest pain of his life. So Paul was no stranger to even to physical suffering. So as we see on 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 to 27, so last part on 23, he says, I am talking like a madman, with far greater labors, far more imprisonment, with countless beatings, and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journey, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, dangers from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger At sea, danger from Paul's brothers, in toil and hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food and cold and exposure. Whew. Do we still complaining? Uh, we are all experiencing suffering in our life, but maybe it wasn't even close with what was Apostle Paul had gone through. But one thing for sure, God has a purpose for these sufferings. So, and that is what the Apostle Paul show us in his letter to the Corinthians. So turn with me with 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 to 10. So verse 7, so to keep me from becoming conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelation, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weaknesses. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardship, persecutions, and calamities. For I am weak, for when I am weak, then I am strong. So how Paul handled suffering provides an example for us believers. And no text in the scripture more powerfully unfold God's purpose in believers' pains. And perhaps this is the most emotional passage Paul ever written. So from Paul's suffering emerge at least 4 reasons why God allows sufferings in believers' lives. To humble them, to draw them to himself, to display his grace, and to perfect his power. So our first point is God uses suffering to make believers humble. So verse 7, so to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelation, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. So Paul discusses the supernatural experience and the revelations God gave him that prompt him to boast about because of the false teacher's accusation on his credential being an apostle. So Apostle Paul is under assault, he's under attack from enemies, and it is devastating to him. His integrity is called into question, his honesty is disputed, his authority is belittled, and his teaching is despised. And all of this by some false teachers who have come to this Corinthian church with one objective, to teach satanic lies, to corrupt the church, to undo the work that God had begun, to crush that church. So now, in order to gain a hearing, these false teachers have to destroy the people's confidence in Paul. So those super apostles, those false teachers are using their strength, their lack of suffering for the gospel to validate their ministry. And Paul's weaknesses, his suffering for the gospel as spoils to argue against his apostolic ministry. So para sa kanila, ang tunay na Kristiyano ay hindi dapat dumaranas ng paghihirap. So dapat lahat is maayos. So ito yung mga false apostles. So this false apostles boasting is prompt Apostle Paul to share his own experience of God's revelation to him to validate his calling. But as we can see in our scripture reading, he seems talking as if it is another person. So we see that in our scripture reading. He does that because he doesn't want to boast in behalf of himself. So we can see that on verse 5, he says, on behalf of this man I will boast, but on my own behalf I will not boast except of my weaknesses. So this revelation he was talking about, we can see it on the first part of chapter 12. This was his rapture in heaven, although he cannot determine if it is he told her if it is in the body or not, or only a vision. But as you can see, he kept it for 14 years. But we will know that he was talking about himself. We can see that on verse 7. So he says, so to keep me from becoming conceited because of that surpassing greatness of the revelation. So a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. So Apostle Paul emphasized that God allowed his thorn in the flesh to keep him from exalting himself. Though he was the great Christian of all time, Paul was not immune to the normal struggles of life. So certainly because of this surpassing greatness of the revelation, he had experienced. Actually, Acts records 6 visions aside from this passage. And even the gospel he preached, he was received by revelation. We can see it in Galatians and Ephesians. So pride was a constant temptation for him. So therefore, to keep him humble, Paul was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, to torment him. So that thorn in the flesh, that suffering keeps him from boasting for what he received from the Lord, and that keeps him humble. But the identity of that thorn in the flesh has been much debated. So maraming speculation about this thorn in the flesh. So Paul did not describe it in details, indicating that the Corinthians knew what it was. So most commentators assume it was a physical ailment, such as migraines, ophthalmia, malaria, epilepsy, gallstone, gout, rheumatism, an intestinal disorder, or even an speech impediment. So these are all speculations. So, but we can look also as Paul's thorn as a demonic messenger of Satan, sent to torment him by using the deceivers to seduce the Corinthians into a rebellion against him. So at least 4 lines of evidence support that interpretation. First, in the overwhelming majority of its uses in the New Testament, yung word angelos or yung messenger refers to angels. So an angel sent from Satan would be, of course, be a demon. And second, the verb translated torment always refers to harsh treatment from someone. And third, the Old Testament sometimes refers metaphorically to opponent as thorns. And finally, the verb translated live in verse 8 is always used in the New Testament to speak of someone departing. Likely then, the demonic messenger was tormenting Paul by being the indwelling spirit in the leading Paul's apostles. Paul's apostles. So again, this is consistent with Paul's testimony that his severest suffering came from his concern for the churches. So we can see that on chapter 11, verse 28 on 2 Corinthians. He says there, and apart from other things, there is the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. So messenger of Satan, those evil spirit tormenting him, that doesn't mean he was possessed by the evil spirit. So nowhere in the Bible, in any case, a believers can be possessed by the evil spirit. But when we heard the word thorn, it will come to our mind the thorn from the rose flowers. So it prickles us when we touch it. But in the original text, these thorns, it means a sharp sharp stake, usually used for torturing or impaling someone. So it's a bigger stick with a sharp edge. So a thorn in the flesh is something which causes severe pain or constant irritation. So probably some bodily infirmity, sickness, or weakness. So we do not know what Paul's thorns in the flesh was. Either it was a physical affliction of some kind, or it was emotional pain that brought distress to Paul. So it is a good thing that we do not know, because no matter what our sufferings, what our circumstances may be, we are able to apply the lessons Paul learned and get encouragement. So we can relate to Apostle Paul. So ano man yung ating pinagdadaanan is pwede nating i-relate dun sa kanyang sa kanyang thorn, and we can get the lessons and the encouragement. So God permitted Satan to afflict Paul just as he permitted Satan to afflict Job. We know the story of Job. So while we do not fully understand the origin of evil in this universe, or all the purpose of God had in mind when he permitted evil to come, we do know that God controls evil and can use it even for his own glory. So Satan cannot work against the believers without the permission of God. Everything that the enemy did to Job and Paul was permitted by the will of God. So God allowed Satan to bring devastating suffering on his saints to achieve their greater usefulness for his own purpose. And that's bring us to our point number 2. So God uses suffering to draw believers to himself. So verse 8, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. So facing this thorn in the flesh that brought him intense pain, Paul went for help to the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comfort us in all our affliction. So we can see that on chapter 1, verses 3 to 4. So Paul followed the example of the Lord Jesus Christ, who is in time of intense suffering in Gethsemane, also appealed 3 times to God to deliver him. So, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. So Paul drew near to God also in the intensity of his pain. That is the most blessed place a believer can be. And that's what we don't usually do when we are not suffering, when everything seems okay. And that was the best thing to do. He goes to God and he goes back 3 times. His prayer was in faith. His prayer was specific. His prayer was persistent that he might be delivered from this. And so here we learn a second lesson. Profound suffering has a very positive effect on our prayer life. Where else we are going to? So he faced the greatest trial by turning to the only one he knew to be sovereign over all things. In all circumstances, and all person, righteous and unrighteous, his Lord. And he asked him to remove it. This is what happens in times of great stress. Our prayer lives are enriched, and we enter into the richest, deepest, sweetest communion with the Lord, far sweeter than the prayer we offer in times of prosperity. And what is the Lord's answer? And that leads to our third principle we learn. Our third point. God uses suffering to display his grace. So verse 9, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. So Paul's 3 requests for relief resulted in the same answer from the Lord. So God did not answer by removing Paul's pain, because as noted above, that pain was spiritually productive. So it revealed Paul's true character. It kept him humble and drew him intimately in prayer to God. The Lord granted Paul relief not by removing his suffering, but by giving him grace sufficient to endure it. So the word grace is a magnificent word. In the New Testament, the Greek word charis was used 155 times. And it should be used frequently because we live in grace. It is grace in which we stand. These marvelous words refers to divine favor, divine blessing, or divine benefit. It refers to that which God has given to us in Christ, not because we earned it or deserve it, but because He willed to give it. And all of God's gifts for His children are given by grace. So everything we have in our salvation, from beginning to consummation, is by grace. We do not earn our justification, it is a gift of grace. And we do not earn our sanctification, it was too a gift of grace. We certainly do not earn our glorification. It is the culminating gift of grace, which then allows God to show us everlasting grace through all eternity. So in the book of the Ephesians, both in chapter 1 and chapter 2, it reference made to the riches of His grace. even to the surpassing riches of His grace. All of this is, of course, is in and through Jesus Christ. So it is grace that saves us, it is grace that sanctifies us, and it is grace that gives us understanding of the Word. So it is the grace that gives us wisdom to apply it. It is grace that gives us the power to overcome temptation and sin. It is grace that allows us to obey the Lord. And it is grace that enables us to serve and to minister. It is grace that carries us through sufferings with endurance. And it is grace that lifts us above disappointment and pain. So from our birth to our deathbed, it's all about grace. And even in between in all our sufferings. So suffering itself has been transformed by Christ and made the greatest instrument of grace ever known. It was through His intense suffering on the cross that the salvation of the world came about. And by freely embracing all sufferings, He made it the seams and source of all grace. By so doing, Jesus also invites us to see our sufferings as an opportunity for grace. By embracing it, uniting it to His cross, and offering it to the Father, our suffering is also able to take on infinite value and become a channel of the mercy of God. And our last point number 4, God uses suffering to perfect His power. Excuse me. For my power is made perfect, sa verse 9, last part ng verse 9 to verse 10. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardship, persecution, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So God not only wanted to display His grace in Paul's life, but also His power. He not only wanted the apostle to be humble, but also strong, because power is perfected in weaknesses. So it was His affliction that burns away the pride and self-confidence. So before that, we need to clarify this weakness. Sometimes we heard someone saying about their weaknesses, about something that they cannot refuse, or things they cannot say no. So my weakness is when I saw beautiful girls, I can help it. I can help myself. Or if I can see good food, I can help but to eat more. Or these shoes, these bags. So God's power will not be perfected for these kinds of weaknesses. So weaknesses Paul talking about here had nothing to do with sin. Our weakness is we cannot turn away even from our sin. So this weakness is accepting that our effort, our own strength, cannot rescue us in our miserable situation, either on sins, persecution, sickness, or sufferings. So Paul had lost all ability, humanly speaking, to deal with situation at Corinth. He had visited there, he sent someone there and written the Corinthians letter, but he could not completely fix the situation. He was at the point when he had to trust totally in God's will and power. So it is when believers are out of answers, confidence, and strength, with nowhere else to turn but to God, that they are in a position to be the most effective. So no one in the kingdom of God is too weak to experience God's power, but many are too confident in their own strength. So physical suffering, mental anguish, disappointment, unfulfillment, and failure squeeze the impurities out of the believers' lives. So making them pure channels through which God's power can flow. So though Paul's circumstances had not changed, he could still exclaim, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27, he reminded the Corinthians that God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong. The apostle himself had ministered among the Corinthians in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. He did not love the pain caused by the false apostles, knowing that it was satanic in origin. Yet he embraced it as the means by which God released his power through him. So suffering humbles us, draws us to God, displays his grace, and perfected his power on us. So at some point in time, there were things that we hold our hopes on our wealth, on our career, on our relationship, or even on our health. But one day, God will take all this all away, or make it useless, to humble us and to draw us to Him. So, look at our hearts. Lord, is there anything am I doing that not glorifying to you, that you are calling my attention, or anything I should be doing and didn't do? You are calling my attention and teaching me to follow you. The grace of God and His power will manifest in us as we choose to bow down and surrender our lives to Him. So, anyone who's watching right now, who don't have yet right relationship with God, He wants to invite you. He knows what you're going through. He knows what's your pain. He knows your problem. And our biggest problem was God is holy and we are not. So only God can deliver us on this pandemic of sin. So God does not promise to eliminate all our problem, all our suffering on this earth, but He do promise a far more better life where there is no more pain, no more tears, no more sin, and we will live together with Him in paradise. So verse 10 summarizes the truth of this passage. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insult, hardship, persecution, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. As Apostle James says, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So we don't rejoice in our pain. We don't rejoice if cancer is eating our flesh away. And we don't rejoice in our heartaches. But what we do rejoice in is the presence of God in the midst of our sufferings. So God never promised any one of us that we would never go to the valley of shadow of death. What He did promise us was He will go with us. So even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Let us pray. Father, thank you for your words. Thank you for the suffering that remind us to look on the things above. And thank you for the sufferings that remind us that nothing is permanent on this earth. Thank you for your grace, that everything happens for a reason, and that is for our own good and for your glory. In Christ's name, amen.